Okay, welcome back. In this video we are going to look specifically at some of the definitions that we have in terms of angles, rotations, and degree measures. Okay, so one of the things that we're going to look at here is how do these actually look on paper, what is it exactly that we're talking about, especially in terms of our values. So first and foremost we have to look at your angles and what that means. So when we're talking about angles, we're also, in terms of trig, talking about rotation. So to create an angle in what's called standard position, we have to be able to identify your initial side, which is your ray that is along your x-axis, and it's in the x-axis on the positive direction. And then you have to know your terminal side, which is a second ray that's going to be different than, say, your positive x-axis. So, what are we talking about here? Well, first of all, when we're talking about your initial side, we are talking about a ray, say this pink one, that shoots along that x-axis. Okay, so this right here would be considered your initial. And then with that, you would need to know what your terminal side is. So your terminal side would be any kind of ray that shoots out forming an angle. So let's say it was something like this blue one here. And so this would be considered your terminal side. And then with that, what you can see is that we have an angle. So your angle is going to go from that initial side out to whatever your terminal side is, and we label that with a theta. Now in this case, because my initial side is positive and my terminal side is above 180 degrees, we consider this to be a positive angle. Okay, so in other words, if it's on the top, kind of like a sunrise, then you have a positive angle. Now we can look at the same exact idea again, but from a different perspective. So again, if we have this initial side that comes straight out here, and then we had some terminal sides, so let's say this one here, and this time it's down below that 180 degrees. So again, we know that this is that initial side. We know that the green one is your terminal side. Well, what we know from here is that we're still going to start on the initial side and we're going to travel over to your terminal side, and again, this is my angle. Now because this one is dropping below, so I like to think of it as it's below sea level, or it's dipped below the ocean line, this is considered to be a negative angle. Okay, so again, positive angle would be like, say, your sunset or above ground level, and then a negative angle is going to be down here below, okay, where this center line, your 180 degree line, is going to be your dividing factor. Now with that, we also have quadrants, and we label our quadrants in a very specific way. So very simply, the first thing we need to know is you need to know that we are always going to start with 0 degrees. And then when we start, usually we're going to spin clockwise. And so here we're going to come up, this becomes 90 degrees. Come over again to 180 degrees. We're going to drop down here to 270 degrees. Come all the way back over, and this one also shares at 360 degrees. Okay. Now, with that being said, each quadrant, so each block here, has its own label. So this is going to start with 1, And then the trick is you're essentially drawing the letter C. So 1, and then 2, 3, 4. And we do label our quadrants with Roman numerals, so do make sure that you do label things correctly as you work through problems. But again, the trick is you want to start at 1, end at 4, and it draws the letter C. Okay, as long as you did that, then you know you labeled it correctly. Now, a few things that we have to keep in mind is these definitions here. First and foremost, when we're talking about a complete rotation, we're talking about going all the way around the circle. Thus, we say a complete rotation is 360 degrees. Cut that in half, and we get that a half rotation is 180 degrees. Cut that in half again, and we end up with that quarter rotation being 90 degrees. Okay. Now, we have a little note here, so this is going to be important, especially as we get further along into pre-cal, is that you want to remember that if an angle shares the terminal side, it's called a coterminal angle. Now, that's going to appear further into pre-calculus content, but it is a good thing to keep in mind when we're talking about just our definitions here. Now, the last thing we have is we have to classify angle measures, and we need to classify them in different ways. We have right, acute, and obtuse, and then we have straight, complementary, and supplementary. So if we start with our right angle, it's the same as thinking about a right triangle, so right angle is obviously going to be your 90 degrees. Now, acute, the way I like to remember acute is I like to think of it as a cute little angle. So acute would be any angle that goes between 0 and 90 degrees. Obtuse is a big angle. So when I think of the word obtuse, I think of it as long, drawn out, stretched out, bigger. And so here we're talking about anywhere from 90 to 180 degrees. Now, if you notice, these three classifications only deal with 180 degrees because when we look at just the positive, when you flip down to the negative, it's the exact mirror as what went on. So we only have to worry about it once. Now, a straight angle is any angle, obviously, that does not have a bend in it. So if you take a look at your quadrant line here, starting at 0 going to 180, this line right here would be a straight line. Therefore, straight angles are 180 degrees. Now, complementary angles are talking about more than one angle. And we have a rule here. When we're talking about complementary, we're talking about summing your angles to equal 90 degrees. So this is where we are talking about more than one. It could be anything from 2 or more angles. And when you add them all together, you should get 90. Now, that's then the same case for supplementary. Only instead of adding together to give you 90, in this case, we're going to sum together and give you 180. Okay? So again, that can be anything from 2 or more angles. But the trick is when you add them all together, you end up with 180 degrees. So there you have it. That is a little snapshot on everything you need to know in terms of your definitions for angles, rotations, and the beginnings of degree measures. So if you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, enjoy yourself, relax, and I'll see you next time.